Okay, now we're up to step 5. So we're going to update the assessment matrix or competency map by changing the ticks in the column of the assessment instrument developed to the question numbers within the assessment. This will show where the instrument specifically covers the requirements of the unit of competency. In a complete tool or matrix map, all of the instruments would be directly mapped to the unit of competency. So you might read that, you might have had a look at it in Manual 2, and it seems a little bit confusing at this stage, and that's okay. I'm going to explain it out to you, because this is really key in making sure that what we're assessing is in actual fact the unit of competency and not what we just sometimes think. So that's really important. So I'm going to come down and open up the competency map or matrix. And same thing again, I would save this as per my naming convention version control. So the assessment tasks here are going to be, again, exactly those coming from the plan. So my observation, my verbal questioning for 2, and my third party report. And then these will be reflected over here, because when I look at task 1, I'll see the name of it there, observation. List elements and PCs here, add more rows as needed to list the elements and PCs. You're going to have a very enjoyable time copying and pasting all of that from the unit of competency. So there's no thinking involved here. We're just copying straight from the unit of competency and putting it into. It's not going to work for me. I need to enable the editing. Okay. Same for 2. Insert more rows as required. Foundation skills if listed in the unit of competency. So if there's none, take that section out. Required skills, again, back to the unit of competency. Grab the required skills. I'm just going to get a few as an example, but you would have to take all of them. Pop the required skills in there. Same with your required knowledge. You would go over to the unit of competency, copy, paste them in, and then the same with your critical aspects. So copy and paste them in. So obviously you need to have the rows there, but I'm not going to go into the copying pasting side of that. There's plenty of help in Word. It's more to the point of where you're getting this information from. So no thinking in required as yet, just copying and pasting straight from the unit of competency. Now we're going to start mapping. Now you've listed 3 assessments or 3 pieces of evidence or 3 instruments, all the same thing. You're going to map those across. Now I have created my observation checklist, so I can map the numbers across for that. For the time being, I'm going to leave my verbal questioning and my third party report because I want to concentrate on this. So what you need to have happen here is your instrument open and your matrix open. So I've got my instrument here where I've got all my words, as you can see, of the things I'm going to see. Use your imagination, please. So remember number 1, I said that would be perhaps greeting the customer. So when I look at greeting the customer and what I'm going to see, and that's why it's good to sometimes have 2 screens or one of these things printed. Use appropriate interpersonal skills to accurately clarify customer needs expectation. Use identify limited. So there's not really anything too much there, but so I might leave that one and it wouldn't be mapped in just yet. It might be mapped in down further. If in observation 2 I wanted to see them address the customer's needs, for example, and I can put EGs in here as well, ask questions, things like that. So if that was my number 2, this is where I'm getting the number 2 from. So I'm saying in my observation at point 2, I'm going to get them to identify the customer needs. So I would put a number 2 in there because that's whereabouts in my instrument I've addressed it. So as you work your way through, you know, might have a 2 in there, and then at observation 3 I might have done that. Down here in my critical skills, it might be in 5 where I'm doing this. Communication skills to monitor, that might be in 4. So you get to see how you're mapping that observation checklist to the units of competency, and it's a little bit the chicken or the egg. So as you're mapping through, you might realize that you really haven't observed them looking at how to communicate with the customer, and that's okay because this is where you pick up those gaps, and you might go back and build some more observations in there. We need to assess every performance criteria at least twice. So at the moment I'm imagining that I've assessed it here in 1. What you're going to do for tasks 2 and 3 is just think about where you would probably assess them. You're not going to have those documents to be able to map it in for numbers, so we're going to put an X in there. So I would imagine for me, I would ask them a question about how do you clarify customer needs in the verbal questioning. So I'm just going to put an X in there because that's where I would assess it. Identify limitations in addressing customer needs and seek appropriate assistance for delegated individuals. For example, I would imagine that I might ask that in the third party report. So I might be talking about how do they address customer needs and seek appropriate assistance, and do they do that in their job role, and them ticking yes, so that's where it would be assessed. Looking at this here, I've got a gap because again, remember, everything needs to be assessed twice. So I can, if I would like to, say I would ask a question about that as well. So when I look at those 2 X's, they negate me having to do an observation for that. I've addressed it twice. I don't need to also address it a 3rd time in the observation. Sometimes you'll address things more than twice, and that's okay. But for example, this one's okay, and this one's okay because they're addressing things twice. This is not okay, and this is not okay because it's only addressing things once. So I need to look at it and go, yes, in the verbal questions, I would ask them some questions about those if I was to then go on and build that instrument. So we're just putting an X in there to note and also show your assessor that you understand that everything's being assessed twice. But it's the first step is to go through and map out where exactly in your assessment instrument, so your observation checklist or your verbal questioning, the numbers of where you've addressed that information or that requirement from the unit of competency. Again, that's just a brief overview of it. If you have a look back in Manual 2, you'll get a lot more detail. Thank you.